This is the artificial intelligence voice of Chris Williamson narrating this pod-slice summary of the Modern Wisdom podcast. The Modern Wisdom podcast segment featuring Bryan Caplan is centered on challenging traditional feminist arguments. Bryan Caplan defines feminism as the view that our society generally treats men more fairly than women. Caplan outlines his approach to tackling this issue in his book, Don't Be a Feminist, written for his 10-year-old daughter. Contrary to conventional depictions, he suggests that our society doesn't necessarily treat men more fairly than women. He proposes examining the empirical evidence to determine societal treatment of either gender. Caplan cited societal concerns such as pay gaps and career progression, illustrating that these issues can often be attributed to variables such as differences in hours worked by each gender, career choice disparities, job unpleasantness, and individuals' life priorities. He suggests focusing on whether treatment corresponds to performance. Caplan also examines the critique of inequalities in dating. He criticizes the tendency among feminists to compare the average woman to the most successful men. He emphasizes the need to consider both extremes, noting that men have a higher representation at both the top and bottom of society. Such an assessment led to a broader conversation discussing why in Caplan's assessment, men are more likely to be homeless, commit suicide, or find themselves imprisoned. Caplan argues that rather than men in general being treated more fairly than women, society sees a greater spread in the outcomes experienced by men. He suggests that feminism's continuing impact is largely based on human feelings and traditional norms favoring female well-being, which have evolved into a philosophy demanding consistent application, which in turn avoids any recognition of the variety of experiences among men. Both host and guests discuss this societal bias, noting examples such as public sympathies and donations being more readily extended towards female-centric causes. They also comment on how stories of female success are often more favorably received than their male counterparts. They discuss this imbalance, contemplating the impacts of historical treatment of women and the traditional view of women as property. They conclude this discussion recognizing the limited data on such pre-modern societal structures, suggesting a more complex issue than purely societal bias favoring women. The conversation continues on the Modern Wisdom podcast with Bryan Caplan challenging traditional feminist arguments. He maintains his stance, emphasizing the need for empirical evidence rather than assumptions or societal norms to determine gender disparities. He suggests that societal concerns such as pay gaps and career progression can often be attributed to other variables rather than simply being a product of gender. Caplan further touches on an interesting theory of gamma bias shared by Dr. John Barry of the Center for Male Psychology. It argues that society generally asexes or emphasizes the gender in pro-female and anti-male stories, while dissecting or minimizing the gender aspect in pro-male and anti-female narratives. Discussing the implications of this bias, Caplan and Williamson note how it contributes to the skewed perception of feminism. In response to Williamson's question about a possible refined approach towards feminism, Caplan advises firstly examining the facts and whether women are significantly disadvantaged. He considers that acknowledging individual preferences and choices influencing market outcomes, rather than presuming gender biases, could begin to address the issues rife in modern feminism. Caplan and Williamson appear to agree that societal perceptions around topic sensitivity can often obstruct essential conversations ranging from the practice of male circumcision to reintegration of mothers into the workforce. Caplan, therefore, advocates for handling issues on a case-by-case basis rather than sweeping generalizations. Moreover, Caplan cautions against promoting negative feelings of resentment, antipathy, and victimhood. He believes these foster an unproductive mindset that can impede one's success and contribute to the unfair treatment of men. They also touch on claims of women's disadvantage in labor markets, with Caplan arguing that these claims often misrepresent the reality. Finally, they dive into the potential trade-offs that feminism might be making and how it could be inadvertently disadvantaging women, with Caplan attributing this to the propagation of antipathy and self-pity. He supposes that an erroneous belief in widespread mistreatment might deter businesses from hiring women due to fear of potential legal ramifications. He concludes this segment by suggesting that societal biases, both against and in favor of women, might be skewing our understanding of gender dynamics. The Modern Wisdom podcast features Bryan Caplan continuing his discourse on traditional feminist arguments. Bryan emphasizes the importance of empirical evidence rather than societal norms and assumptions in understanding gender disparities. He discusses the idea of gamma biases, a concept put forward by Dr. John Barry of the Center for Male Psychology. This theory posits that society usually highlights gender in pro-female and anti-male narratives while suppressing gender in pro-male and anti-female ones. This bias, Caplan suggests, contributes significantly to skewing the perception of feminism. In response to a question from the host, Chris Williamson, Caplan advises that the first step toward refining our approach to feminism is to examine the veracity of the claim that women are significantly disadvantaged, acknowledging the role individual preferences and choices play in shaping market outcomes, could be a useful starting point in addressing concerns plaguing modern feminism, instead of presuming gender biases. Both Williamson and Caplan agree that societal perceptions often obstruct necessary conversations. Caplan also cautions against fostering resentment and a sense of victimhood, which he believes can breed an unproductive mindset and lead to unjust treatment of men. Claims regarding women's disadvantage in the labor market are discussed, with Caplan arguing that these claims often mischaracterize reality. And they delve into potential negative impacts feminism might inadvertently have on women, attributing this to the endorsement of resentment and victimhood. A false belief in widespread mistreatment might deter hiring women out of fear of legal issues. Bryan Caplan proposes that societal biases, both in favor of and against women, could be influencing our understanding of gender dynamics. Caplan's discussions with Williamson tackle sensitive issues like the practice of male circumcision and the reintegration of mothers into the workforce, promoting a case-by-case approach over sweeping generalizations. He shares the experience of his friend Scott Aronson and the negative backlash he encountered from feminists after expressing his struggles as a shy male teenager in his blog. Caplan highlights the need for more tolerance for mistakes made by shy people trying to communicate with the opposite sex. He also criticizes the increasingly broad definition of harassment, likening it to accusing everyone of being potential pickpockets. Caplan and Williamson also delve into discussions about the concept of agency, theorizing its dissolution by feelings of pity and antipathy. They stress the need for fostering a sense of personal agency and individual sovereignty for a healthier societal dialogue. Caplan delves in depth into the philosophy of personal agency and self-pity during his conversation with Chris Williamson. Bryan connects this concept to happiness and asserts that the crucial determinant of human happiness or unhappiness is whether one spends time in the company of people they enjoy. And this really emphasizes the influence of personal choices on one's happiness. Caplan dissects these choices through the lens of locus of control, embodying a profound psychological concept referring to an individual's perception of the primary causes of events in life. He advises that individuals need not feel stuck in the company of people they do not enjoy, rather. They should exercise their agency to spend time with those they do. It's about turning the dial down on negatively influencing companionship, exercising that locus of control, and focusing on things that improve one's life. An enlightening discussion follows about the role of externalized locus of control, a belief that external forces dictate life outcomes. Bryan states that those struggling with self-pity and antipathy often demonstrate an overly externalized locus of control. He promotes the philosophy of focusing more on things within one's control to alleviate these feelings. Williamson and Caplan eventually transition their discussion to the pursuit of love. Bryan emphasizes the importance of overlooking physical attractiveness and focusing more on personality. He advises women to consider dating older men to mitigate issues with immaturity commonly associated with men of their age, further illustrating the idea of personal agency in seeking compatibility. Caplan subverts a common complaint from women who are struggling to find mature companions by making an age adjustment suggestion. That, he explains, is a practical application of their personal agency. By advising women to contemplate dating older men, he offers them a probable remedy for the immature man conundrum, as age often correlates with maturity. Furthermore, He offers a novel solution to the problem of women surpassing men socioeconomically, which is also rooted in the age variable, since age is a strong predictor of wealth. By giving their partners a head start in terms of age, women may find potential mates who are more financially stable. Throughout the discourse, Caplan continues dismantling societal norms and structures. He confronts the status quo, prods questions, and offers solutions. As the conversation progresses, Caplan consistently encourages the audience to take charge of their life and make informed choices, truly a testament to his belief in the power of personal agency. Diving deeper into the conversation, Caplan draws attention to the communication barrier between individuals, and particularly between the genders, asserting that people overestimate others' ability to perceive what they're thinking. He urges individuals, especially women who typically are encumbered by traditional expectations, to be explicit about their desires. He provides advice suggesting simple phrases like, "You seem promising," can make a significant impact on the course of interactions and relationships. The idea isn't to throw oneself at another person, but to be transparent and avoid falling prey to the misguided notion that people can read minds or deduce our intentions accurately. The conversation veers towards the art of signaling, an essential part of intergender interactions. Caplan and Williamson delve into the nuances of signaling, discussing its roots from historical practices like dropping a handkerchief and how it comes into play in the modern dating world. Caplan asserts that in light of movements like Me Too, women could consider adjusting their signaling guidelines for increased clarity and understanding. In the following parts, Caplan digs into societal norms and expectations, primarily around careers and parenting. He argues that current society is biased heavily towards career pursuits, often overlooking or undermining the importance and joy of parenthood. In fact, he shares his personal experience about how he consciously chose to sacrifice professional success to some extent to enjoy the rewarding journey of parenthood. And the discussion then navigates controversial waters with the concept of antinatalism, a philosophical stance that opposes procreation on moral grounds. Caplan critiques this concept, strongly arguing against its philosophical underpinnings as propagated by figures like David Benatar. He raises thought-provoking questions about consent, pleasure, and pain, urging individuals to challenge their belief systems. Finally, Caplan offers an analysis about education and income as critical indicators of fertility rates. Interestingly, he reveals that while higher education seems to correlate with lower fertility, higher income leads to the opposite effect. He reasons that it's not the material aspect, but the social element of education that shapes these outcomes, as society puts heavy emphasis on career success, often sidelining the importance of parenthood. He also notes that women's education and income play a more significant role in determining the number of children a couple might have, indicating how personal choices, societal expectations, and financial security intersect in our life decisions. And the conversation with Caplan further plunges into an exploration of societal behavior. They talk about how people sometimes falsely represent their behaviors, an example being more people claiming to be church attendees than those who actually go. This discrepancy between stated and revealed preferences creates confusion and can lead to misunderstanding. As the discussion moves forward, the talk focuses on the vague language people often use to represent their intentions. A common example is the phrase, "I can't," where the truth is often, "I don't want to." Caplan points out that people choose their words to sound better socially, even if the words don't communicate the honest intention. This way of speaking not only leads to misconceptions, but also fails to express the genuine feelings of the speaker. Emphasis then shifts to the realm of politics and the prevalence of untruths. They discuss how politicians often use ambiguous or exaggerated language to gain the support of their listeners, despite the statement's underlying inaccuracy. For instance, politicians may make grand claims like, "We're doing everything possible," when in reality, their efforts are limited and discerning. Bringing attention to the concept of censorship in totalitarian societies, Caplan points out how dictatorial governments manipulate their narrative. They tend to suppress competing falsehoods more than they suppress truths, aiming to monopolize the spread of information. Caplan emphasizes how these governments value the power of propaganda, which is more concerned with influencing public opinion rather than distributing accurate information. Lastly, the topic of conversation shifts to the idea of accountability and the evolution of personal beliefs. Caplan mentions instances when influential figures completely overhaul their philosophies publicly but continue representing themselves as authorities. He argues that it would be more virtuous for them to acknowledge their fallibility and take a step back publicly before claiming expertise in the new ideology. This kind of prestige politics, according to Caplan, undermines intellectual honesty and promotes a disingenuous image. Faith also ties back to societal pressures and affects the way individuals present themselves in public, cultivating a culture of misrepresentation and self-serving narratives. As the conversation between Chris Williamson and Bryan Caplan unravels further, they delve into themes of hypocrisy and its omnipresence in the public sphere. An instance brought up by Williamson pertains to pop star Lizzo, who, despite positioning herself as an advocate for positivity towards fuller figures, is alleged to have driven her dancers to engage in undignified acts. Caplan observes a similar trend of inconsistency in the political landscape. He points at authoritative figures like Kim Jong-un or Maduro, who continuously project an image of compassion and advocate for their citizens. He challenges this image by acknowledging the divergence between their claims and their actions. For instance, while such leaders may publicly champion compassion, behind closed doors they might be committing heinous acts against their own people. The dialogue explores the notion of actions speaking louder than words. Over time, individuals in power, like influential activists who eventually become politicians, may use altruistic rhetoric as a dormant tool for evoking public emotions. However, Caplan proposes the idea that once these individuals gain power, their actions often contradict the compassion they had once promised. Caplan files down to an essential question: what happens to the nicest people when given power? Would they too succumb to corruption and cruelty? While some might argue that power alone corrupts, he suggests that individuals who end up abusing power were likely predisposed to such behavior. He emphasizes the idea that outwards displays of altruism are often a manipulative facade. For this reason, Caplan calls for a heightened skepticism towards authority, as the saying of all wonderful altruistic things publicly is often a prelude to terrible deeds in private. In regard to where interested listeners can follow Caplan's work, he mentions Amazon, where all his books, including Don't Be a Feminist and How Evil Are Politicians and Voters as Mad Scientists, are available. He also blogs for Econlog and maintains a personal webpage at bcaplan.com. Despite the high inflation, he boasts that his books remain affordable at the price of $12, proving his dedication to disseminating thought-provoking insights to the public. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of the Pod Slice.